Hola, ¿cómo estás? Espero que estés súper bien. This is Tamara Marie, host of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. Now, before we jump into this episode, I wanted to let you know about a special opportunity that you're definitely going to want to take advantage of, especially if your goal is to become fluent in Spanish. For a limited time only, my team is opening the doors to listeners of the podcast to take advantage of a free language coaching session. Now, in this session, it's not just we're teaching you about verbs or grammar, but we're really going to do a deep dive into what are your goals for learning Spanish, assess where you are on your journey to fluency at the moment, and help you map out a 90-day plan for how you can get to fluency. So we are going to help you take your Spanish to the next level, whether you're afraid of speaking Spanish or you just get a little bit nervous when you're talking to native speakers, or maybe you've got some of the basics down, but you really know that you struggle with getting your Spanish to flow and your listening skills aren't up to par. Whatever it is, even if it is a specific grammar issue, we will help you map out how to tackle that. And normally these sessions do cost, so we are offering a few slots for free. There are limited spaces available and they'll only be open up through the end of the month. So make sure you sign up. Go to SpanishConSalsa.com/coach. That's SpanishConSalsa.com/coach to book your free language coaching session where we will help you map out a 90-day plan to get to Spanish fluency. Okay, let's get started with the episode.
Bienvenidos! Welcome to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast, the show for Spanish learners that love music, travel, and culture. Close your grammar textbooks, shut down the language apps, and open your ears to how Spanish is spoken in the real world. Let us show you how to go from beginner to bilingual. Here is your host, certified language coach, Tamara Marie.
Hola, bienvenidos al episodio 107. Welcome to episode 107 of the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast. In this episode, I will be breaking down the lyrics to another classic salsa song by Hector Lavoe, and the name of the song is El Día de mi Suerte, or My Lucky Day. Now, you may remember a few weeks ago, if you've been following the podcast, we had our goal setting challenge, and part of the activities in the goal setting challenge included some vocabulary and grammar and listening comprehension exercises using this song. So this may not be the first time you've heard the song, but I hope that when I go through the breakdown of the song today and the meanings of the lyrics, that some of this will be familiar to you if you participated in that challenge. Also, I will be talking a little bit about grammar. This song uses a lot of future tense as well as the past tense. And there's also a little bit of a tricky construction that's used in the song that can often be misunderstood or mistranslated. So I'll give you some insight into that because it is actually fairly common and you may come across it and not really understand the meaning of a sentence if you come across this construction. So I'll break that down a little bit and give you a couple of other examples of how you may hear it used in regular conversation, and also a way that you might consider using it in your own Spanish vocabulary, because it does tend to make things a little bit easier if you know this shortcut. Before we get started with this week's topic, I want to acknowledge another one of our listeners for leaving us a review in Apple Podcasts. And I also love this username. It's from Vanilla Banana Delight. So it makes me think of helado, thinking of ice cream already. But Vanilla Banana Delight left us a 5-star review, and it says, "This needs 7 stars. There is so much information. Congratulations on reaching the 100th episode." And then there's several heart emojis. So thank you for the review, Vanilla Banana Delight. And if you want to leave a review, don't forget to click on the link in the description of this episode or check out our show notes page, and you'll be able to click on that link to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and you just might get a shout out on the show. So let's get started with the song. I'm going to break down the chorus first because that is, of course, the most repeated part of the song, and it actually kicks off with the chorus. So it says, "Pronto llegará el día de mi suerte. Sé que antes de mi muerte, seguro que mi suerte cambiará. So let's take a look at that line by line. So you'll notice, like I said, there is a lot of use of the future tense in this song. And if you're listening closely, you can hear that just by listening to where the stress is in the verb. So, for example, it starts out, pronto llegará. So that llegar is followed by the a sound at the end, and that's where the emphasis is. So that's a dead giveaway. Anytime you hear that, you sort of hear the infinitive followed by a stressed vowel sound, that you know you're dealing with the future tense. Okay, so pronto llegará means something like soon it will come, or it will arrive soon. And, he's talking about what that is in the next line. But this is the verb llegar, which is to arrive. So llegará means, it will arrive. El día de mi suerte. So that's what he's referring to. So soon my lucky day will come. So of course, el día is the day, and it's literally the day of my luck. So el día de mi suerte, my luck. But in English, we'd probably translate it as my lucky day. And also remember that it's el día and not la día. This is one of those sustantivos or nouns that is actually an exception to that rule that you may have been told about masculine and feminine words in Spanish that tend to end with an A if it's a feminine word. But in this case, día is a famous exception to that. It's el día. Sé que antes de mi muerte. So this sé que, this is actually from the verb saber, which is to know. So sé is the yo or first person form. So sé que is I know that. Antes de. So this antes is before. And a lot of times with these prepositions in Spanish, there are other, auxiliary words that come with them. So this antes de, you can kind of think of that as a full phrase that just means before. So it's saying before something else. So when you see antes de, you're expecting something else to follow that. So you can say, okay, before what? So antes de qué? So you'll often see that used together. Antes de mi muerte. So this is my death. So I know that before I die is probably a better way that we would translate that full phrase in English, but literally it would be, I know that before my death. Seguro que mi suerte cambiará. Seguro que, so this is, I'm sure that, or surely is another way you can translate it. So seguro is just a way of saying I'm sure, I'm confident that this is the case. Seguro que mi suerte, my luck, cambiará. So this cambiará is from the verb cambiar. And again, this is the future tense. So this cambiará is will change. And he's referring to mi suerte or my luck. So essentially this whole chorus is saying, soon my lucky day will come. I know that before I die, surely my luck will change. So that's really the sentiment of the whole song. And I'm going to be breaking down the first verse next, and you'll kind of get an idea of why he's saying that his luck needs to change based on the content of the song. All right. It's a little bit of a sad song, but it is also a hopeful song because he is saying that he knows that his luck will change. So he has some faith here that things will get better for him. Okay. So he starts out talking about his childhood. So he says, Cuando niño, mi mamá se murió. Solito con el viejo me dejó. Me dijo, solo nunca quedarás, porque él no esperaba una enfermedad. A los 10 años papá se murió, se fue con mi mamá para el más allá. Y la gente decían al verme llorar, no llores nene, que tu suerte cambiará. ¿Y cuándo será? All right, so let's take that line by line. So he says, cuando niño, mi mamá se murió. So cuando is when. Niño literally means boy, but it can also be used to refer to male children. So cuando niño is sort of a shortcut of saying, cuando era niño. So when I was a young boy or when I was a child. Mi mamá, which is my mother, se murió. She died. So when I was a child, my mom died. Solito con el viejo me dejó. Solito con el viejo me dejó. So this solito is actually interesting because this is the word solo, which means alone, but it is the diminutive form. So instead of just saying solo, he says solito. All right, so solito, like despacio, despacito. So chico, chiquito. So again, you can make lots of different words diminutive in Spanish, and solo is no exception to that. So he says solito. He's probably saying that because he's talking about something that happened when he was a child. Con el viejo, and this is with, literally this means with the old, okay, el viejo. But, when you see sort of this definite article el, which is the, right before viejo, it's really, more of a colloquial way of saying the old man. So if I say la vieja, it's like the old woman, or el viejo is the old man. So it's talking about a person, and it's another way it used to refer to like your mom or your dad. It's not really offensive, I guess, like saying, oh, the old man. Probably women wouldn't like it as much if you say the old woman, but it is pretty common in Spanish. So translating it probably wouldn't go over too well, but in Spanish it's perfectly fine to say el viejo or la vieja. So in this case, he's saying, he is with the old man. And then he says, me dejó. So this dejó is the past tense of the verb dejar, which in this case means to leave. So she left me alone with the old man. So when his mom died, he had to live with his dad, and it was just him and his dad. Me dijo, solo nunca quedarás. Me dijo, solo nunca quedarás. So me dijo is the past tense of the verb decir, which is an irregular verb. So this me dijo is, told me. Okay, so someone told me. And in this case, it looks like he's referring to his dad that he just talked about in the previous line. Me dijo, solo nunca quedarás. So that I would never be left alone. Or you could think of the verb quedar as meaning to remain. So I would never remain alone. And nunca, as you know, is never. Porque él no esperaba una enfermedad. Porque él no esperaba una enfermedad. So this porque is because. Él no esperaba. So he did not expect. And this is interesting because the verb, this is actually the imperfect past tense of the verb esperar. So esperaba. Anytime you hear like sort of that aba, that ABA, it's sort of an indication that it's an AR verb in the imperfect tense. Let's take a quick pause to hear from one of our sponsors. The Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast is sponsored by Shape and Foster. Shape and Foster is a lifestyle development app that provides monthly actionable insight from 6 experts in mental health, financial planning, nutrition, fitness, yoga, and a life coach. It's a one-stop shop for self-improvement. The app provides a proactive and informed approach to improving your mental well-being by enabling you to build practices and habits. Lifestyle development is about enhancing your quality of life by improving awareness, identity, and potential in one community of actionable insight. Learn the 6 pillars essential to a healthy heart and healthy mind in one unique app. Visit www.shapeandfoster.com for your free 14-day trial. That's www.shapeandfoster.com. And now back to the show. But in any case, the verb esperar, you probably have learned it. It means to wait, right? Or to wait for something. But it can also mean to expect, to expect or hope for something. So I can say, espero que tengas un buen día, saying I hope you have a good day. So it can also mean, to hope for something or to wish for something and not just to wait for something. So in this case, no esperaba means he did not expect. It's not something he expected to happen. Una enfermedad is an illness. So he told him that, he'd never be alone because he did not expect to get sick. A los 10 años, papá se murió. A los 10 años, papá se murió. So, a los 10 años. So, at 10 years old, or when I was 10 years old, papá se murió. He's saying dad died. So, his dad died when he was 10. So, like I mentioned, this is a little bit of a sad story, but again, he is saying that he is sure that his lucky day will come soon. But he's saying that because he's had a lot of unlucky days. Se fue con mamá para el más allá. Se fue con mamá para el más allá. So this se fue, this is actually the verb irse, which is to go, but again, this is in the past tense. So se fue is he left or he went away. Se fue. And that's something you can, use a lot in regular day-to-day situations, right? Like if somebody says, ¿Dónde está él? ¿Dónde está su papá? ¿Dónde está, no sé, cualquier persona? I can say, se fue. ¿Dónde está ella? Ella se fue. O simplemente puedo decir, se fue. So, they left or he or she left. Se fue con mamá. So he went away or he left with mom. Para el más allá. So this para in this case is really indicating it's going towards something. So it's really saying the two of them went to el más allá. Más allá in general means beyond, right? So it's literally like the more there, over there, right? Which doesn't make any sense. So again, this is one of those cases where you have a phrase and not, something you can translate word for word. So más allá in general just means beyond. But this has this definite article, el. So it's like el más allá. So think of it like the great beyond, right? We may say that, or really the afterlife is another way to think of it. So basically, he lost both of his parents. So like I said, a little bit of a sad story. Then it says, y la gente decían. So, and the people said, so decían is the verb decir, and this is also the imperfect past tense. He's telling the story here and talking about what people used to say to him. So people would tell him, or they used to say to him, al verme llorar. So in this al verme so ver is the verb to see, right? And verme is to see me. So al verme llorar, which llorar is to cry. So when they saw me cry, so he's saying this is what these people would say to him when they saw him cry. They would say, no llores, nene, que tu suerte cambiará. No llores. So again, this is another use of the verb llorar, but this is el mandato, so command tense. They're telling him, don't cry. So no llores. And nene is like a way of saying baby. It's a sort of a term of endearment. You may have also heard like nena, again, very commonly used in Puerto Rico, which means something like babe or baby, but it's just a term of endearment, pretty common. Que tu suerte cambiará. Your luck will change. So they're telling him not to cry because they know, again, they have faith that his luck will change. And then he asks a question, and he asks this question throughout the song over and over. ¿Y cuándo será? Which is basically, and when will that be? This is really interesting sort of internal dialogue, or even, something he was saying to these people at the time. But it's very common, like, I guess, the discussion around faith, right? When bad things happen, we tend to look at things sort of kind of bleak and go, oh my gosh, when are things going to change? But he's saying, I'm sure that there will be change. So it's kind of interesting back and forth in the song if you listen to it. So he kind of ends every verse like this. It's like, ¿y cuándo será? And when will that be? So será is the future tense of the verb ser. which is to be. So, ¿cuándo será? When will that be? So he's wondering, sort of pondering out loud, when will that happen? Now, the construction I wanted to mention to you that's used in this song, I went through it briefly when he was talking about what people used to say to him when they saw him cry. It doesn't say cuando me vieran llorar, right? Like, so when they saw me cry. It says al verme llorar. So al itself, when it's used alone, typically is a contraction of two words in Spanish. So a, which usually means like to or at in Spanish, and the definite article el, which means the. So usually instead of saying a el, because you have those two vowels so close, it just sort of gets smushed together and becomes a contraction, al. So usually it means to the, like in the example, vamos al cine, like let's go to the movies. So vamos, we go, al, to the cine, movies, right? So that's probably how you've typically heard al used. Pero if you're using al and you're not referring to a place, right? So al cine, al parque, so to the park, to the movies. And it's actually followed by a verb and the infinitive of a verb at that. So it's a very specific case, al plus the infinitivo of a verb. Then it means something more like when, right? So that's why, explaining this, he says, y la gente decían al verme llorar. So al verme, when they would see me cry, llorar. Al verme llorar. Now, another way to sort of think about that, and again, this is more of a formal translation, but it might sort of help you understand the concept here. Technically, you would translate it as a pun, right? So upon seeing me cry, al verme llorar, then they would say these things to him, right? But you'd probably just say when, right, in day-to-day conversation. So it's a kind of a replacement for cuando. So instead of having to conjugate the verb that you're talking about, you would use the infinitive. So let me give you a few more examples. Hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer. So if I wanted to say, when you get to the house, let me know. I could simply say, al llegar a la casa, avísame. Al llegar a la casa, so when you get to the house, avísame, let me know. So again, this is just a way of using this when something else happens, so al llegar. Another example is, al encontrar la cura, el médico puede ayudar a los enfermos. Al encontrar la cura, el médico puede ayudar a los enfermos. So upon finding the cure, the doctor can help the patients or the sick people. Al encontrar, again, upon finding or when he finds the cure, puede ayudar a los enfermos. Let me give you one more example. Me duermo inmediatamente al acostarme. Me duermo inmediatamente al acostarme. So this al I'm using now with the verb acostar, which is to lay down. Al acostarme, so upon laying down or when I lay down, I fall asleep immediately. So me duermo inmediatamente, I fall asleep immediately. Al acostarme, upon laying down. So as soon as I get in bed or when I get to bed, I fall asleep immediately. And that's definitely wishful thinking on my part. I wish I could fall asleep immediately. That definitely does not happen to me. But anyway, hopefully these examples give you some idea of how you can use this. And you may notice it's a little bit of a shortcut because I don't have to conjugate the verb I'm using, right? There's some context here though, right? So me duermo, I'm talking about myself. So I don't have to really, conjugate the verb acostarse because I'm already talking about myself. So maybe you'll find this a little bit easier, or at least you'll start to recognize it when you hear it. Because sometimes when you use the word cuando, it could influence the conjugation that you use depending on the situation. So this al plus the infinitive of a verb meaning when, can be a little bit useful. But it's also something, again, you might want to be on the lookout for, because when you hear it, you may mistake it, or you may kind of go, oh, what? Like, that doesn't make sense, right? Because technically it's like, oh, to the see me. It doesn't really make sense if you try to translate it literally. So you have to be aware that if you see al followed by the infinitive of a verb, then it means when that thing happens, or upon it happening. So hopefully that was clear. And this is really a great song. So if you want to get the full lyrics with the breakdown and the full translation, sign up to be a supporter of the show. When you sign up at learnspanishconsalsa.com/support, we have several different options you can choose from if you want to sign up to support the show so that we can continue bringing you new content each and every week. We would really appreciate it. And in exchange for that, you'll also be able to access not just this particular song that we covered in this episode, but you'll also get access to all of our episodes. And we have transcripts for each and every one. And wow, we're at episode 107 now. So that's a lot of content you'll have access to if you sign up to support the show. So check it out at learnspanishconsalsa.com/support. And as always, I hope that something that you heard in this episode of the podcast has helped you go at least one step closer from Spanish beginner to bilingual. Hasta la próxima.
Thank you for listening to the Learn Spanish con Salsa podcast at learnspanishconsalsa.com.